spill all the beans on the three men who are not here.
Oh yeah. Just pretend we didn't say anything when they do show up.
Mostly Tom.
So are we coming out of the speakers?
No.
Can you hear us in the back?
It's funny because they came around and went testing on all of them. Someone's on.
It's on. Already, only mine's on.
No. You know, I have never been in a room that somebody. Oh, and here are the editors, right on time.
Yeah, we couldn't figure out the number.
I know, Carl. When you were my editor, you wouldn't have accepted that as an excuse.
I sent my assistant to find it.
Yeah, exactly.
Hi, everybody.
So I will just talk really loud.
Yeah, I can do that.
I've never been in a room where people couldn't hear me, so. or escaped.
You never really been in a room where people wanted to.
Well, there's that, yeah.
He's probably walking the halls looking for us.
Al Milgrom.
I think
He's
he's
in the restroom. The little editor's room. Yeah.
Okay, so we are now joined by Tom DeFalco. And of course, the great Carl Potts.
He got a great.
Isn't he supposed to get a legendary?
Yeah, he should have had at least a legend.
My microphone's not even on.
Yeah. I'm okay with getting nothing, but and Terry is the baby of the group.
Oh, that's sweet. I am that sad, but I am.
Hard to tell now that we all have a great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I fit in. I'm amongst my people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know where our sound guy is. Probably busy doing some sound somewhere else.
Don't worry about it. We have editor voices.
Yes.
We're used to projecting.
Projecting. Okay. So we'll allow Al to come on his own accord. So welcome to the Marvel Editors Panel, or as I like to call it, warming up in the Marvel Bullpen.
Okay.
Thank you for the three of you. As I mentioned, we are joined by the extraordinary Howard Mackie, the stupendous Harry Kavanagh, the legendary Tom DeFalco, the spectacular, no, did I use spectacular already? I've run out of adjectives because I'm in television. So did Carl Potts. Beg pardon?
He ran out of the adjectives. That's why his book was just Spider-Man.
No, okay. So did Todd McCrumman. Okay.
The marvelous Al Milgrom. So, gentlemen, you were editors at Marvel in the 1980s and the 1990s, a time when, for those of us who were reading comics, it seemed like the Marvel bullpen was this mythical place that was a cross between a college fraternity and the coolest job you could ever want. So, were we just led to believe this, or was this actually the case? And I'll throw it to whoever would like to start.
Honestly, in hindsight, that's how I see it. At the time, I don't know. It was work, hard work at times.
No, but it was fun.
But it was
always fun.
We had fun. And I sometimes have compared it to, like, later on, you see the way the Google campuses were set up and all that. On a much smaller scale, it felt like that to me. I mean, I worked, my mentor was Mark Grunwald, and as hard as we worked, he insisted at times that we balance it with some fun stuff that would probably get us in trouble. Now that human resources actually exist.
But it was mandatory fun. It
Yeah.
really was.
Well,
Mark.
Listen, you know, so many times I'd be sitting in my office, and Mark would come in and say, I need $100. And I go, okay. Because Mark asked me.
Wait, we could do that?
No, Mark.
Tom, by the way, I need $100.
So I'd hand him $100, and I'd say, what's this for? He says, we're having a pizza party today. Oh, okay. So, and Mark would routinely spontaneously decide that we're having a pizza party, which he and I have to split the cost for. I don't do that. Or
At least he didn't make you pay for the whole thing.
well, sometimes he did.
Okay.
And every once in a while, I'd say, okay, tomorrow we're having ugly tie day. I was always completely coached up by that because I don't own any ugly ties. Go ahead, Howard. Think that great for yourself.
Tom's ties were really spectacular. But the one year, Mark, one of his assignments to us all, or I don't know if it was your birthday or around Christmas time or whatever, was everybody was responsible to go out and find the ugliest tie you could find and buy it as a gift for Tom.
But he already had them all.
Yeah. And I think you looked at them and I'll wear these. And you have the tie rack on the back of the door, and he just cycled through every. Although you gave me one, I think you distributed them maybe when you left, because I have one that is still my daughter at the time had a little she called it a stuffed bear, hugging bear. And I had it, and I shortened the tie, and it's still tied around Hugging Bear in our house, in memory of you, Tom.
So you strangled your daughter's toy in front of her?
Yeah, pretty much.
But what these guys didn't understand was, I was a former freelancer, and I, whenever I got yelled at by a man in a tie, it always seemed to have more significance. So I decided when I was an editor, I would always wear a tie, so that when I yelled at guys, they would be more impressed.
That worked out.
Take you seriously.
Didn't work.
Ooh, he's wearing a tie.
Be careful. No, seriously, when I was a freelancer, guys in ties scared me. I don't know why.
As far as the culture and attitude of the company, I knew at the time that it was something special. I just didn't realize it was that rare. Nowhere place I've ever been has been that consistently fun, open. It's like anywhere else. You got a mix of people there, and you don't get along with everybody all the time. But generally speaking, everybody was up there to get the work done and have a hell of a good time while doing it. And like you mentioned, Mark Bruno, sort of the heart and soul of that of the company, and that era pretty much ended, unfortunately, with Mark's passing. But a lot of us would, unlike a lot of people, a lot of us would get up in the morning and look forward to going to work, and a lot of people can't say that.
Yeah.
Well, we all had a passion for what we were doing, and that's rare itself. And so
Certainly weren't
it's
doing it
easy
for
to have
money.
fun.
Well,
Because we could get $100.
everybody in the business, all the creative people in the business, I'm including the editors. It was something we'd always wanted to do. They're a kid growing up, I want to draw comic books, I want to be Jack Kirby, I want to blah, blah, blah. And so, by some miracle, you end up in the business and you're doing what you love, and it's just, it's great. And Tom has told me on occasion, he says, they don't realize we do this stuff for free. And I said, wait a minute, Tom. No. Or we pay them for the privilege of doing it. I said, no. I really love my job. I love doing comics. They gotta pay me, man. How am I gonna live? It's kind of, but then the idea was that we just liked doing it so much that it seemed like it was almost something you would do without pay.
Yeah, but I always told people, make sure you get paid.
Yeah.
As a
What he told me.
freelancer, and for years I would always say, make sure you get paid, because if you don't get paid, you're gonna have to go out and get a real job. and it's always been my desperate fear that I'm gonna have to go out and get a real job someday, which maybe next year. I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's the other. The freelancers certainly there was always like, am I going to get another job? Am I going to get a next job? Am I going to have another issue to write or to draw or to letter or to ink or color? So Gene Colan, who was a terrific artist, he was always calling the office, going, "Are you going to send me another plot? Am I going to get another? When am I going to?" And he'd be like 2 pages into the issue he was working on that month. But he'd be worried, what about next month? You know, when am I gonna get the next plot? So, you know, and some of these guys had lived through eras where the comics, you know, boomed and busted, and then they were the witch hunt, you know, subject of a witch hunt kind of scenario. And so, you know, Marvel had, what was it, Black Thursday, Friday? What day was it that there was black? You know, back in the, like in the,
Were they fired everything?
yes, they basically said, I guess Stan, who was in charge, had bought, he was always concerned with keeping the freelancers busy and employed, and so he had accumulated a huge amount of inventory, which had all, you know, spending money and buying, and so there were stacks and stacks, and somebody, maybe in accounting, finally looked at the books and said, you know, we've spent all this money, you know, and they would cross, you know, when stuff got used, they'd cross it off the books, and it hasn't been crossed off the books yet. And it turned out that they had so much inventory that they probably had enough to go for years without having to, you know, buy another new story. And this was in the era when they were doing the, you know, the horror comics and westerns and, you know, romance books, sure, and, you know, Patsy and Hetty maybe was, you know, and they, Marvel was always one of these companies that sort of, they'd find out what the latest trend was and they'd copy it and follow it and do it. So, and, you know, Stan, God bless him, didn't want people to go without work, so he would give them work, and then suddenly they said, okay, don't buy another story. And, you know, and everybody got called up, and it was on, I guess, a Thursday, now known as Black Thursday, and they just said, we don't have anything, and until we use up a lot of this inventory, we're not gonna have anything.
We were fortunate enough, all of us here, to be working for the company where generally it was an era of growth, and for a while there, exponential growth, until the company got bought by corporate raiders who proceeded to drive it into bankruptcy, not once but twice.
Talk about the fun stuff.
Yeah, before then it was, you know, we worked hard, we played, we had fun, and we made a really nice living from it. It was hard to argue.
Yeah. Do you think, because I actually wasn't as aware of the Black Thursday the story.
And it was in the late 50s.
Okay, so when I was born.
Yeah, well.
So do you think that that is basically what gave rise to Marvel fanfare? Because I remember when I was an editor,
yeah,
we were all tasked with always having a inventory story in the drawer.
Oh.
And then ultimately, it was getting to the point where it was maybe not going to be able to fit even vaguely into continuity,
yeah,
and it was passed over.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
No, that's what I mean. So those inventories didn't stack up.
Well, a little bit of background, which you may or may not know, but Marvel went through a whole bunch of editors-in-chief. You know, it had been Stan for a long time, and then Roy came in, and Stan went on to do more corporate, kind of trying to sell the stuff on the West Coast and so on. And then there was Roy, and he did it for a pretty long time. And then there was like a kind of a string where whatever popular writer was working on his books would become editor-in-chief. So I think Len was editor-in-chief for a while, Marv was editor-in-chief for a while, Jerry Conway was editor-in-chief for a while. Archie Goodwin was pissed because they passed over him, to, you know, and gave somebody the job, Conway maybe. Conway was only editor-in-chief for about a minute and a half, and then he went over to DC, you know, and it just, you know, it was a string of guys, and then finally they hired, and Archie got a run at it, and realized, why did I want this job? Because it's a hard job, and it's, you know, it's a pain in the ass. And you know, you've heard the expression trying to corral cats, or you know, or wrangle cats, or whatever. And that's what it is like working with a lot of freelancers. So you know, finally Shooter got the job, and he had been a writer at DC Comics from the age of 13, which is ungodly, amazing. And he, you know, the first thing he tried to do was he said, convinced the people at Marvel, let's get an editorial staff. And they said, what are you talking about? It's always been one guy. You know, you want to hire 5, 6, 7 guys to be, that's going to cost us a lot of money. And he said, okay, how much money is it costing us to miss our deadlines every month? To have reprints slotted in where it was supposed to be a regular issue in continuity, but because everybody was screwing up so badly, you know, books weren't making it to the printer on time. They were doing reprints. I mean, reprints from like the previous year, not from like 20 years in the past or something like that, where people wouldn't maybe be familiar with it. And so he proceeded, and they said, well, that's true, we're spending a fortune in overtime at the engravers and at the printers, and then probably the distributor. I don't know who was gouging us for money, but everybody who could did. And he hired staff, and I had been an editor very briefly at DC, 1 year, almost to the day. He hired me. When did he get Seller up? Before, after, during? I don't know. Okay, doesn't matter, whatever. Everybody's looking at, well, once he hired me, he said, you know, you think there's anybody else who would be good for us? You know, and I said, Hama was in DC with me. DC had a severe cutback, and they fired 40% of the staff, including all the most recent hires. And he says, okay, take Larry to lunch and see if he's interested. So I called Larry. I said, Larry, come on in. I'm buying you lunch. He said, okay. We sat, we ate, we talked, we chatted. And at the end, I said, by the way, the reason I asked you here is Shooter wanted to know if you're interested in an editorial position. And he said, yeah, I can do that. You know, so, and then he hired Louise Simonson away from Warren Publications and their black and white magazines. And he put together a really nice and, you know, varied group of talented people to be editors. And, you know, and the end, I knew I had a point. And he didn't. Well, one of the genius thing I thought that Jim did was all the books were running way behind because all the editors were the previous editors, the writer editors. They were editing their own stuff, which means they were supposed to crack the whip over themselves to get the stuff out. And they said, hey, nobody's going to bother me if I don't get this in on time. So things were getting late. So he said, okay, that's done with. We have actual editors now, and they, you know, you'll have to report to them and be responsible. And one of the first things he did was he got everybody to buy inventory stories, and he, you know, very smart. Okay, here's a story. It's got Spider-Man, Captain America, and the Black Widow, for instance. And so that way, if any one of those, you know, characters in their own books was falling behind, you could slot one in. It wouldn't be in continuity, but at least it would be original material. And so it could be an issue of Spider-Man, it could be an issue of Captain America, it could be an issue of the Black Widow. Didn't have a book at the time, but whatever. Or it could be an issue of Marvel Team-Up, or Marvel 2-in-1, or in a pinch you could say, oh, it's a guest starring, you know, oddball Avengers this month. And he hired new guys who were just breaking into the business, and he got guys out of mothballs who hadn't been doing much or any work for a while, gave them all work, and they all, you know, did this stuff. And slowly but surely, he got all the books back on time. And, you know, the corporate people were really happy because they're going, oh, we're not wasting all this money on overtime pay or late fees. And now what Howard's referring to is there is a perception that Marvel Fanfare, which is a title I created, when was it? Mid-late 70s. Somewhere in there. So I created it because Jim explained to me, I know nothing about the business of comics. I'm a creative type of guy, I think. He said, yeah, we don't make money on the ads. And I said, that doesn't track. How can you not make money on, you know, all the ads? You get a 32-page comic book with 22 pages of comics, and a letters page, and then some house ads, and then the rest is paid advertising. And most publishing, that's how they make their money. You know, they sell, you know, Vogue or Time or whatever. They sell advertising space to big corporate sponsors who pay them a lot of money, and they make a lot of money doing that. And they, you know, they pick up some extra money from people paying the cover price on the newsstands or what have you. So he said, yeah, I said, it makes no sense. They're paying you money. How are you not making money? He said, well, it defrays the costs. We don't have to pay editorial, you know, artwork and stories and stuff for the pages we use for the advertising. So it saves us money there. And we, you know, they pay us something. So it helps keep the cost down. I said, well, and this was in the day when they had started this direct market stuff, and I said, well, what would it cost if you did like a nice format book with better paper and better printing and better color, and had no ads? You know, what would you have to charge to make it worthwhile, to make a profit on something like that? And he says, I don't know, but I'll go talk to the business people. And he did, and he came back, and I think, I said, how about if we do a book that's like that, you know, whatever the cover price needs to be, we'll make a profit, and we can do 32 pages, all editorial material, and we get, you know, guys to, you know, to do the best stuff, and we pay them extra for doing it and stuff like that. So he took all these factors and he came back, and I think it was $1.50 was what they decided. And the advantage of the direct market, which was a relatively new thing by then, was that you would sell the comics to the direct market, whoever they may have been at the time. They would keep all of the copies you sold them. They got a steeper discount, but there were no returns. In the newsstand sales, you know, you'd print 100 copies, you'd send them out. A drugstore would, you know, they'd get 20 copies, they'd sell 5 copies, and then they'd return or claim to return the other 15 copies. Very inefficient. You're spending a lot of money printing unused copies. And by the way, I personally know of drugstores where they would just take the, you know, it got to be on the honor system. And there is no honor among magazine distributors. So they would take the books, they'd sell what they sold, and then they claim that they didn't sell 15 copies. And what they would do is they, you know, and so earlier you had to tear off the title, you know, so take that off. They would sell those damaged comics to local mom and pop stores for, I don't know, you know, a nickel, and they or 7 cents, and they would charge a nickel for them to the kids who came in. And so they would make money. They would get a full refund for the unsold copies, which they then sold, you know, in a secondary market, stuff like that. So there's lots of ways. The direct market, they said, okay, for the bigger discount, we'll keep all the ones we buy. We'll sell what we can sell, and then the leftover ones we'll use as inventory for back issues. People come in looking for back issues and stuff. So anyway, Marvel Fanfare, the idea was it was supposed to be a real good quality comic book with, you know, various stuff, an anthology title. But as it happened, you know, Jim, once I put the idea in his head, he goes, okay, when are we going to publish Fanfare? And I went, oh God, what are they doing? You know, so I said, okay. And it just so happened I was in somebody's office, and there's this beautiful Chris Claremont, Michael Golden job, which was used in the first issue of Fanfare. It was something that had been done for Marvel Team Up, but for some reason it stalled out. I think, you know, they were waiting to get the 3rd and 4th chapters done, and it was sitting there, and I said, what's this? Michael Golden. Oh, Chris Claremont. Ooh. They said, well, it's a story we started doing it, and for some reason, I don't know, you know, one or all of the talent crapped out and moved on to doing other stuff. And I said, well, if you're not going to use that, you know, allow me. And I took it gleefully, and, you know, slated it in Fanfare. And then, you know, I ended up having to use other artists on the last couple chapters. Chris, I think, wrote the whole thing, but I got David Cockrum, you know, who was no slouch, to do a chapter. And then I got Paul Smith, who was a discovery of mine, and had done a backup story, I think, in the first Fanfare. And he was doing animation art. He was not like, he didn't just spring from the head of Zeus full grown. But terrific artist. And I I said, you know, Paul, you know, he did one job for me. I said, Paul, it's great stuff. You know, would you like to do more? And he said, yeah, I really would. I said, good. I've got a you know, an issue of fanfare, a couple issues down the road here that I'm going to need somebody to finish the story on, and he did it. And then he went on to become a superstar. But so no, fanfare was not meant to be a way of burning off infamy. That was not the original plan. But I was not above, you know, taking an inventory job that I thought was good stuff and using it, because why would I turn that stuff down? And it saved me work as an editor.
Yeah, exactly.
Some other editor had already done the hard stuff. I just said, give it to me. I'm publishing that. But I did a lot of, you know, new stuff, original stuff, and so on and so forth. And some very interesting. I got to use some very good, sometimes offbeat artists and writers and storylines, and you know, all in all, I'm fairly happy with the results. So that was long-winded, eh? Yeah, sorry.
I hadn't even noticed. I was going to say, it's interesting because I've spoken to a lot of writers and artists from the era that you were editors at Marvel, and they speak of the way that they were mentored, how the editors would encourage them to try something or improve. So when you're at Marvel at the time, how do you kind of foster that culture where you are stepping up and the creators are not only afraid, you know, that the editor is going to be mad at them, but the editor is instead going to, you know, push them to get better by giving them concrete advice?
It was all, it's just part of the,
Process?
part of the process. You, in those days, you know, we had these incredible inventions called the telephone.
I remember them.
And we spent a lot of time on them.
Yeah.
They were attached to our desks. And you would call up a writer and you'd say, you know, we've got to do the next issue of Amazing Spider-Man. He'd say, yeah, I have some ideas, and talk to you about the story. And you know, if you had any ideas that you thought could help them, you would throw the ideas out there. And we'd have, you know, nice discussions about where the story should be, and you know, a lot of times we're spending, you know, more of a focus on the characters than the actual plots and stuff. You know, what's going to happen with Peter this month? What's going to, you know, what's his love life going to be? You know, what problems are Aunt May going to pick up on? And we would, you know, talk about these characters as if they were real people, because, you know, we know they're not real people, but our job as creators is to make you believe that they're real people. So we have to believe they're real people, and we treat them, you know, real.
I mean, but that all, I mean, addressing both those points, that was certainly from my perspective. I was mentored by Mark Grunwald, and then peripherally by the thug sitting to the left of me. But there was an environment that was fostered, and I mean, I came in as a complete novice. I made the natural transition from being a traffic manager for an international exporting company. That's what I'm calling it. To being an assistant editor at Marvel. And Mark, I was told that every time, you know, my job was the mail came in, and it was all mail. Aside from having those devices on our desk, we didn't have those devices that everybody gets sucked into right now. You know, there were no computers when I left staff the year before the staff had computers at that point. But my job was
You wouldn't
to
have known how to work on it.
open the mail every day, and he said, I want you to call everybody that sent something in. And mostly it was the artists, but often the writers as well. But he said, I want you to look at the stuff, and I just need you to find one positive thing to say about the pages you received. It's to let them know that it was received, which, you know, in this era of computers and email, I'm working with some editors currently, and I have to ask them, oh, did you get that file I didn't you? But I was instructed to pick up the phone and call these guys, and like I said, same thing, and he said, and then, I'll go through it in a little bit more detail later on, and if there's stuff that needs to be discussed, I'll do that. But yours is, because that's the thing that's going to make them, hey, know it's there, and you said something positive, and they're gonna want to do more work for you. So there was an environment that was created, and as you said, I mean, we also have expense accounts. So, we did a lot of business lunches at a certain point where you would have the writers and artists come in, and we'd go out to lunch and we'd discuss character and story. And but it was, I was just talking to another artist up there. I mean, at the end of the day, most of the artists, Al, you lived on Long Island when you were an artist, everybody came into the office.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, when you think about it, it was like a who's who of legendary comic book professionals, and especially, and there were 2 days. That it was the cutoff day to turn in your vouchers to get paid, and then payday, because everybody came in to collect their check. But you'd walk around, it was not unusual to walk into an office and there's Walt Simonson, Al Milgrom, Bill Sienkiewicz, Steve, anybody just hanging around, just shooting the breeze and say, oh, what would be fun? And usually, always, even though, it's become trite, what if? But every story is a what if. And everybody was just there, kicking around ideas. And while we never got paid overtime back in those days, most people didn't leave the office at 5. Actually, I think the most creative work that happened was immediately after 5, when we were all just sitting around BSing. But that was the environment.
That's one of the things I think now where a lot of people are working remotely, there's certainly benefits to that, but in an environment like we were lucky to work in, having all of these creative people around you all day long during the work week was very conducive to, continuing the creative atmosphere. There were things that would happen just spontaneously because 2 people happened to be talking or overhearing something or seeing something on the wall, and it would just spark an idea, and it was, a creative bonfire before long when an idea got rolling. We could all go out to lunch one day and just be shooting the breeze, and someone comes out and we'll come back with the idea for what's going to tie all the annuals that get together that year. There was an illustration I had on my wall when I started. It wasn't the Marvel illustration. It was this moment in space with this weird creature on his shoulder, and Chris Claremont walks into my office and says, "That looks kind of like Ileana. If you turn that creature into Loki, it'll write a story around." Those kind of things can't happen in a remote work environment. And on the rare occasion that at least in my office, when a book was really late and we needed to fill in or something.
You never had a late book.
But I could call in, I'd call in Ralph and Ralph Macchio and the artist who I would get on it, and we'd shoot the breeze for a while and brainstorm and have a great time and come up with a great story.
Well, I mean, and that was the advantage to us all working so closely. And I've told this story, I know, to you, Tom. I remember when I was an editor and when we were taken over by New World, okay, a movie, a production company. And they suddenly wanted us to start doing comic books about some of their scripts.
Yeah.
Tom walked into my office one day, and in a very pleasant manner, as was his wont, as you can tell.
I'm a very sweet guy.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. It's not by my table, and I'll tell you the other stories.
I got some too.
Yeah. And I until I started working in Marvel, I had no gray. But he had 2 screenplays. Yeah, he had 2 screenplays in his hand. And one was for House 2, the second story, and the other one was for RoboCop. And Tom said, yeah. Oh, by the way, everybody at Marvel at the time was tasked with doing their impersonation of Tom, so here you go. He said, Mr. Howard, I got these 2 scripts. They need to be turned into, 48-page black and whites? He said, and you're late. Threw them on my desk. And then okay? We were in the Virginia meeting, which was the scheduled meeting once a week where we talked about where books were, who was late, whatever. And Virginia gets to the 2 new sheets and she said, okay, I have House 2 and I have RoboCop 2. Do we have anything on that? And I stood up, because I learned from the best, and I said, oh yeah, House 2 is being written by Ralph Macchio, who was sitting right there, another editor, and I said, RoboCop 2 is Bob Harris. And they both went, well, because I hadn't spoken to them at all about this. And Tom, as editor-in-chief, said, so it is said, so it is done. And by the way, you're late. and then I had to immediately, House 2 was the tough one, so I think I got Alan, who's the writer and Kupperberg, who's the...
Alan and Paul?
Yeah,
Alan is the artist.
I think I got Alan Kupperberg to do layouts of this 48-page story, and he did it like in record time.
Yeah.
And then this speaks to establishing relationships. The core of that is now I have to get the whole thing inked. And in this really terrible adaptation of a really terrible movie, if you can find a copy and look through it, I called in every marker I could possibly do. And so I have...
So you inked it with markers?
Yes, some of them did, actually. But I had Tom Palmer next to Al Williamson, next to Klaus. I got to do some pages, Klaus Janson. And then it was like I would walk through the bullpen and I'd see somebody holding a pen. I'd say, oh, you know what ink is? Here you go, I'm giving you a page. So, but I couldn't, and I got it done in time. The movie got delayed, so I got to then spend the next 3 months making all of the corrections that we had to make. But I got it done because I had those working relationships with all the artists, and that was what was encouraged when I was there.
Did that book sell at all?
Oh, I doubt it.
I doubt it, right?
Yes.
So thank you, whatever picture company that was.
New World.
New World.
Yeah.
I don't remember them owning us.
It wasn't long.
It wasn't one. And one of the ways we...
Did they know we did mostly like superhero stuff? I mean,
No.
House 2, come on.
One of the ways we, built up our relationships was we conned our freelancers. When I was an editor,
I never.
not once. When I was an editor, the first office I had was just a tiny little cubby hole. The only way we could fit in 2 desks, my assistant was Mark, was to have them facing each other, which actually worked because we passed pages back and forth to each other. And the first bit of furniture I bought for the office was this big glass bowl, which I filled with candy constantly. Because I knew that if you have snacks in your office, freelancers will come into your office. And guys,
Well, they weren't getting paid very much.
well, they would come into the office on a regular basis to take the snack, and you'd look and go, and Frank Villa came in, hey Frank, you got time to do a cover sketch? And he'd go, with his handful of, yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
And we caught our guys into doing that. When I got a slightly bigger office, I put in a coffee machine.
Yeah.
I brought in donuts every morning.
Yeah.
All right? And guys would come in every morning for coffee and donuts. Steve Ditko used to hang around because he wanted his cup of coffee.
Yeah.
And, we got to talk to all these guys and kind of con them into doing things.
A lot of times, the bullpen would usually have 1 or 2 open tables, and if the freelancer was delivering work or needed to make corrections, they'd go sit in the bullpen, and then the rest of us editors were walking down the hall and go, oh, Kevin's just in there, when have you got time for a cover? And that sort of thing.
Well, we once, Mark and I had an issue of the Avengers going out. Okay, book was all done, I'm wrapping it up, and Mark turns to me and says, where's the cover? I said, you're in charge of covers? He said, we don't have a cover? I said, again, I I don't know. Yeah, you know. And so he said, I need you to call Byrne. And Byrne was living in Brooklyn at the time. And so I called John Byrne up, and Mark said, okay, it's got to be a simple cover. And I can't even remember the issue number, but Byrne sketched the cover, like he had his portfolio on the subway, for riding in from Brooklyn. He had his portfolio on his lap with the artboard there. He did a rough sketch of a cover, came into the office, showed it to Mark. Mark was going to say, he could have drawn a picture of an apple, and Mark was going to say yes. He said, yep, go for it. And it was exactly what you said. Byrne went to the bullpen, sat down, finished it, wrapped it up, we sent it around, it went out, and he probably wound up having to do, you know, a few other covers for people while he was sitting there.
He was sitting there.
Yeah, well, like doing nothing, wasn't lazy.
You know, we weren't charging him rent or anything.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
Yeah.
right.
He has two hands, he can draw with both.
He didn't need you to so fast with the one.
Yeah.
So, you know,
Really good.
a lot of times when you're an editor, what you're doing is you're juggling. You know, you're trying to figure out, you know, who's going to write this issue, who's going to draw this issue, who's going to write the next issue, you know, and you're just juggling things and just trying to keep all the balls up in the air, because at any given point somebody could catch the flu, or, you know, break a leg, or accidentally throw his girlfriend's cat out the window. You know, these things.
Or accidentally do that.
All of these things. Oops. Happen to people.
You get some really creative stories. If someone was late sometimes, you call the freelancer, and you could tell how creative they were by the excuses they made.
And some guys, you'd say, they come in with their stories and you go, wait a minute, you can't tell an editor that story. Here's 3 better stories to tell me next time you want to lie to me. I did that to
lose
one
5
freelancer.
grandmothers by my last count.
I think the worst I had was 3 grandmothers passed away in a year. The best worst excuse I got was a freelancer that was working in Arizona, and they were late and they weren't answering the phone. Those were those devices that. And so I stayed really late one time so that they wouldn't expect a call from the East Coast out there. So he picks up the phone, and I said, well,
No caller ID in those
you're not,
days.
you're not
Obviously,
responding or anything like that. What's going on with this job? And he says, I'll try and do his accent. He goes, Carl, out here we don't have air conditioners. We have swamp coolers that evaporate the water. And the only room I have for my drawing table is next to my swamp cooler. So all day long, there's a 60-mile-an-hour wind across my table. And by the time the brush leaves the inkwell and hits the paper, it's dry. I told him, if there's anything you have today that is done and you want to be paid for, make sure it's postmarked today because we're done. And that was it. And but I love that story.
I love the accent. I've never heard you do an accent.
I think my favorite excuse was Howard had written a Ghost Rider series for me for Marvel Comics Presents, and I hired a relatively new guy who had done some work for Bobby Chase's office.
I was just telling the story.
I had done a fill-in, I think, for the Hulk, and I really liked what I saw, and I hired this guy to do it, and then 2 weeks went by, and I wasn't hearing from him, and finally I got a hold of him, and he said, I just discovered I'm afraid of motorcycles.
He was a flaming motorcycle.
He was just afraid of and I had to, are you afraid they're gonna burst into the room while you're drawing? Are you afraid to, I didn't even understand the excuse at first. He's like, I'm afraid of motorcycles, I can't do it.
But no, but he kept going.
Well,
He kept going, because you remember what I
you
did?
changed the story and
Oh.
used less motorcycles.
Oh, no, you're misremembering, because me being the kind and considerate person to this artist's traumatic experiences, the
Rode a
next issue,
motorcycle into his house.
well, no, the next issue, it was a story involving the character Nightmare.
Yes,
as I recall.
yes.
The very next issue, it opens up, it's a very small shot of the motorcycle, all that. You go to a double-page spread where that motorcycle bursts into dozens of other tiny motorcycles. This is throw him into the deep end of the pool situation. This is tough love. I'm getting him over this.
But none of the covers he did for the entire 8-part thing had motorcycles. He just
You
wouldn't.
coddle him.
Yes.
So I mentioned an artist who accidentally threw his girlfriend's cat out the window. It wasn't really his fault. He was drawing, the cat would crawl up on his art table, pick up the cat, toss it onto the couch on the side. And he did this 5 or 6 times, and on the 7th time he missed the cat.
I mean, really, whose fault is that?
Well,
I blame the cat.
the problem was, the artist was drawing Keizo, and had to finish up the last 3 pages, and the last 3 pages featured Zabu. And as he's drawing it, you know, his girlfriend was away and was coming back, and he kept bursting into tears as he was drawing it. So
Did the cat not land on its feet?
his editor, Louis Jones at the time, brings him into the office and says, "Come on, we're going to get you through these last 3 pages, but you're under those 3 pages." And she takes him in and, consults him in the office and that sort of stuff. And at one point, I got inkers lined up and stuff like that. Louise had the inkers lined up, and I sneak into the office to get the pages. I don't know why I was involved. And Marvel is a very compassionate place. We care about our people. And I noticed that every wall of the bullpen had cats flying out windows, and they covered the walls with it. So this poor guy is in the office struggling to finish those last couple of pages.
One of the best Grunwald prompted, but there, once in a while you would just go up and do something. But I had an assistant for a while that female assistant editor who 3 other male assistants had crushes on. And they rotate all day long, coming into my office and just talking to her. And one would finally leave, the next one would come in, and so no work was getting done.
I remember that they had to take a number. They had one of those bakery things that you took a number.
But so I used to, her name was Joanne, and I'd say, once I'd say, all right, Joanne, let's get to work. Joanne, let's get to work. And so Mark found a caricature that I think Brent Anderson had done with me and did a word balloon over the top and said, Joanne, get to work. And I came back from a convention trip, and every surface in my office was covered with this Xerox of me saying, Joanne, get to work, Joanne, get to work. Even the flat files are covered. I had a mobile of a pterodactyl that had it on it. And the light fixture, someone had to get a ladder and break open the...
I think that was up there forever.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
long after all the others came down.
Yeah, well, the ones on the front of the flat files I had to take down because it's just to be functional.
Yeah.
But I left the other ones up for long, and then some of them had been customized beyond that. And so I took the best of those and left those up on the wall for when I finally had to take down theirs. But that's the kind of stuff. One time Ralph Macchio went away, and when he came back, his office had been rearranged, and there was a half-typed letters column in the Selectric typewriter, which we used back then, in the name of a former DC editor. So he'd been hired by Marvel and replaced Ralph. So Ralph comes back in his office, and it looks like someone has just replaced him, and no one has told him.
Well, I mean, there were 1 or 2 practical jokes that happened at the time, but I remember at one point we were in Tom's office because he had the coffee machine, and it was in the day where only people that ever showed up at an early time. It was Carl was always there. I had started to because my wife needed to get to her job, which got me in earlier, like at 8:30. And most of the and so it was you and I, Tom and Mark, and we were sitting around, and you were saying, Tom was saying, I don't know what to do. The guys are, on average, people showed up, maybe started trickling in at 10 for the 9 to 5 job. And then, of course, then there was Ralph Macchio, who frequently, when we were at lunch, we saw him just coming into the office. So,
Coming back from lunch.
yeah, so we wrote up a memo. Do you remember? We wrote up the memo from Jim Galton, who was the
From the president.
president of the company, saying there was a mandatory
Emergency meeting.
required at you know, like 9:30 or something, when we knew nobody would be there.
Yeah.
Just we quick printed it off, slid it under everybody's door, and then the 4 of us just went into Tom's office to have more coffee, to watch the panicked people come running in. Say, wait, what did you, what, because again, none of them got there until 10 o'clock.
At one point, the people upstairs, the officers of the company stuff, decided to try to do the carrot and stick thing with that, and they said, you know, anybody comes in by 9:30, we'll have bagels and whatever set up. And they set it outside.
No carrots?
Outside of Archie Goodwin's office at the time. And Archie was one of those people who also often came in late, and everybody was worried about what happened to Archie. So the first day that happened, we're all there getting bagels and buttering them up or whatever, and everybody's looking. Archie's office windows are still dark, and the clock ticks back right past 9:30, and no one's seen Archie. Everything, oh, Archie's so. And like at 9:32, Archie's office turns open, and Archie's in his pajamas. He come in early. That's the kind of atmosphere we had to work in. It was horrible.
Yeah, and
None of that stuff would ever happen in DC, I guarantee you.
And every time I would go on a trip, and the company would send me on a lot of trips, because for some reason they didn't want me around the office, I'd come back, and I had these 2 big bookshelves, and Mark Grunwald, I assume it was Mark, would rearrange the bookshelves in some new fashion. Either all the books were in alphabetical order, or they would all be in reverse alphabetical order, or they
Color-coded?
color-coded or something. So he kept coming up with new ways to organize the books. So I'd get in, close the door, look, and try to figure out how he had arranged it. And then sometime in the course of the day, I'd be talking to him and saying, blah, 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 blah. Let me give you an example. I walk over to the bookshelf and pull out a book. And every time I did that, Mark would.
So, yes, it was fun.
To me, like my experience at other places as well, I learned that a corporate culture like that, that's creative and productive simultaneously somehow, is something that has to be modeled in a way by the people at the top. And we learned that the hard way when Marvel was eventually sold to a bunch of people that had a very different attitude where it came to running a company. And it just changes the whole mood, no matter how enthusiastic the bulk of the people are involved with the company. It's really hard to keep that up when it isn't modeled by the top. And we talked the story before online about your anniversary of years in the business, about Jim Galton was the president of the company. You want to tell a story about Jim Galton coming down to talk to you? This is the president of the company.
The president of the company. So one day I'm sitting at my desk, with my feet were on the desk, and I'm staring at a blank wall.
Did you have the telephone?
What?
Telephone still there? Yeah? No? Okay.
And the reason why I was doing that was because I'm not sure who's edited. It might have been Ralph and Mark. It was an issue of the Avengers, and they plotted themselves into a corner, and they couldn't figure out how to solve the problem. So they came in, they presented it to me, and they said, well, yeah, let me think about things. And so I'm staring at the wall, trying to figure out how we get out of this, and suddenly I realized how we could get out of it. And I leave my office, and as I'm leaving, my secretary says, oh, by the way, Jim Galton was here, the president of the company. And he said, when Tom's not busy, there staring at the wall. And I said, okay, I'll go deal with it, but first I gotta go down to the Avengers office and tell them how to get out of the story. So I discussed it with them. They liked my solution. Okay, you guys are good. I come back, I go up to Jim Gold's office and I knock on the door. I'm thinking, how am I gonna explain what the heck I was doing? So I knock on the door and he says, oh, Tom, come here. I gotta talk to you about some things. I said, Jim, I heard you were downstairs. Why didn't you come in? He says, well, because I saw you staring at the wall. And I said, yeah, so, and he goes, listen, when you're staring at the wall, that's when I'm making my real money off of it. He says, you're doing something creative, right? I said, well, yeah. He says, well, that's what you're supposed to be doing. He says, if I come in and see you, working on budgets or something, I'm just gonna barge right in. But if you're doing something creative, that's what you're supposed to be doing. And I thought, so president of the company really understands what we do.
And we were fortunate that between with the president, with the publisher, Mike Hobson, which unfortunately most people, fans didn't know that, was a very similar personality and supportive. And so when you had Dalton, you had Hobson and Tom, running things, like I said, that's modeling from the top down the kind of culture that you're gonna have at the company. And when those top people were gone and replaced by bean counters, it was a whole different thing. So, like I said, I realized it was a rare thing that we had here. I didn't realize it nowhere else I went was anything like that.
And, I have one other thing to say about the president of the company. At the surprise lunch where they informed me that I was now editor-in-chief, I thought I was going there to get fired. I said to them, guys, you're making a mistake here, because I'm really a freelancer who masquerades as a staff person, and you put me in charge of it. I'm going to feel compelled to do everything I can to improve the lives of the freelancers. The president turned to me and says, well, that's your job. That's what you're supposed to be doing. He says, you also have to make money for the company, but yeah, you should be watching out for your people. And I'm thinking, geez,
That almost sounds reasonable.
that sounds so reasonable to me.
Yeah.
Tommy.
Well, unfortunately, we have run out of time, I've been told. So I'd like to thank our esteemed panel for sharing their
You didn't mention rubber bullets.
I did not mention rubber bullets.
So, but I'm going to give you a quick story of rubber bullets. One time, walking to the president's office,
I know nothing.
and he holds up these, hollow yellow plastic bullets. He says, I wonder what these things are, because I'm finding them all around my office and
And the planters.
the planters. Yeah, it must be the cleaning crew, but can you find out what these things are? And I look at them and I recognize them, because some of the gentlemen, I don't want to call them idiots in front of you, on our floor had gotten a bunch of these plastic guns that shoot these yellow bullets, and at night they were running around.
Oh, there's a part of that story that I think you're forgetting. You bought the first.
I edited that part out.
And gave them as presents to a couple of people who really loved going in and shooting people, and then found out, because I think you brought them back from,
They were having raids.
I think you brought them back from one of your trips, and we found out where we could get them.
Yeah, all right.
Or that.
So, maybe I didn't always have the best judgment.
Why didn't they retrieve the bullets after they shot?
Oh, they were
Because
a
they were
lot.
firing at night with the lights off.
Oh.
And
They have laser sights?
And if
I
you
have
shoot
no
them
idea.
you shoot them in the planters, they're not easy to dig out.
It started out with darts. Do you remember? There were the dart guns, and Elliot decided, because they were called child safety darts or something, so Elliot wanted to see how safe they were, so he pointed one straight at his eye and shot it.
See, the word
And he
idiots
did, and
comes
it
to
worked.
mind.
And he wrote a letter to the company saying, well, you know, I thought this was baloney, and so and it really does work. And like a few weeks later, a case of these blue darts. Do you remember the blue darts, Carl? Yeah, they showed up, but the yellow bullets were game changer. And then you guys wound up doing football.
Yeah, so we had to finish your paintball team, and eventually we went up against the West Point Cadets. That was interesting.
Anyway, they probably.
I'd like to thank everyone again for coming.